Welcome by this episode of Studio Data. Today at Big Data Expo in Utrecht. We have a guest from Qlik, and we're going to talk about insights and visualizations and how to leverage analytics at the enterprise. Welcome. Welcome. Today we're sitting with Sean Price.
Hi,
Sean. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Sean is EMEA Director of Industry Solutions at Qlik. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So, tell us a bit about Qlik. Everybody knows the tools you produce, mostly for BI, but maybe you can tell us a bit your latest developments, and then we'll intersect into analytics, the enterprise.
So Qlik is one of the most exciting analytics companies out there. In fact, we've had a recent expansion of our product offerings. So we now provide a whole suite of products that go from raw to ready, which means basically all the ETL, the transformation, integration of data, all the way through the spectrum of governing that data in a controlled way. Quality of that data all the way through up to the products that people are familiar with, for example like Qlik Sense, where people are accessing and using that information. Qlik is very much been adopting and developing at a hugely fast pace around their cognitive, their AI capabilities within the product as well. Every 10 weeks there's a new release, and I think a lot of people will be very, very excited about how that product is developing and how it's now being used across the different industries. So it's a brilliant company to work for, and I get to talk to people like yourself, but most importantly our customers and our prospects around how to apply those solutions, how those analytics can really land in an organization. So
that's something we could talk about today, how to land analytics in the organization. What are the success stories, and what can we learn to be successful?
Definitely, definitely, and it's not just a traditional way of doing IT. To make it successful, you have to be disruptive and do things slightly differently, I think, to get the success that you need. So hopefully we'll explore that a bit.
Okay, so disruptive, innovative. How do we do that? It's everybody wants to innovate, but nobody wants to change. How do we achieve that? Okay,
so having the experience of done that in a real organisation. So I worked in policing in Avon and Somerset Police in the UK for 20 years. I led both operational and non-operational teams. Part of the BI team that I looked after, I very much had the real mission of creating some wow in the organisation, some excitement, some energy in the organisation. And it's not on a project plan. You don't see that, well, I've got to create some excitement on the list of projects. It doesn't work like that. But the reality of how you really shift a culture of an organisation to become a data literate culture, it's about how you create that wow and excitement. So what does that mean in reality? It means actually using data, building apps and showing your leadership teams, your chief officers, your operational people, your HR people, your finance people. Don't talk about it, but actually show them what you can achieve with data. How can it tackle those pain points in the organisation? How can it look at solving some of those wicked problems that's never been solved before? Culturally, it's been a bit of a taboo in the organisation. Tin open the organisation with data. And as soon as you start to do that, you start to get everyone being interested. You get your chief officers very interested. You get your frontline cops being very, very interested. And that really is a fundamental part of that. And there's a whole blueprint around this, but the first one is just got to get people excited in analytics.
So there is this. We'll go into the policing because it's a very interesting topic, of course. The topic of culture, I find it very, very relevant. That's also what we try to achieve with data, changing the culture, and that is one of the biggest challenges, right? Because fixing the technology is okay, but culture is how a group of people behave. A definition I heard from Seth Godin is of culture is people like us do things like this. So if you show to the board something so different to what they do, it's breaking, right? There's a disconnect. how do you manage to change that culture, and what are the timelines?
Yeah, I mean, it really is, in terms of data, it's getting the buy-in to show them how it can make their jobs easier. Okay, so data is not there to make things more difficult for people. The applications and the analytics, it should be there to make things easier, save them time. So I would always go out and say to officers, how much time can I save you from deploying analytics to you? What do you need to make your job easier? What do you need to protect and help the public more, or catch offenders, for example? So I very much think and speak the language of the business and the people that was there. And as soon as they start to see that rather than having to try and manually pull all these bits of information to pattern together the offending profile of an offender, if we can do that through the analytics and it saves you 3, 5, 10 hours a week, they're going to start to, oh, that's amazing. So what can I do with that time? Actually, I can spend more time with my victims, or I can spend more time proactive policing. And that concept of making it easier for people, saving people's time, hits both things about engagement in the organisation, but also saving money for the organisation and being more effective. Changing an organisation being reactive to proactive. And one of the strongest cases that I've ever seen in terms of the use of analytics was where there was a terrible murder of a refugee. And for years he was being harassed, threats to kill, and the police didn't really believe him and didn't take him seriously. In fact, the opposite. They accused him of being a perpetrator rather than being the victim. Eventually he was killed, he was set on fire, beaten to death and set on fire. And how can that possibly happen? Because what's happening is, that risk for that individual wasn't being seen in a governance way through the whole organisation. Now the analytics, when you build a predictive model on risk scoring for offenders, for example, it's suddenly very visible. That risk is then ending up in the chief's visibility, or the manager's visibility, sergeants or inspectors in policing terms. And we retrospectively built a model, and that person that was murdered was at the top of the risk score. So, if that was in operation at the time, it could well have prevented him from losing his life. Now, 3 years on, those apps are in operation. They're risk scoring, thousands and thousands and thousands of people every day, and they are being visible in the tasking process. So rather than it being lost or people putting their finger up to say, well, that's who we should tackle, it's very much the churn of evidence-based risk modelling is at the heart of the operation. Very different now. I
think it feels to me that the step from saying, look, I have all this historical data, I'm going to look how my new way of working would have performed, looking backwards.
Yes.
That's still safe to do. But how do you bridge that challenge of saying, well, now let's use it in the real world, where lives are at stake? It's a big step.
Yep. And again, if you think of the concept, so traditionally in Avon Somerset Police, there might be 200,000 people that have some connection to offences. Okay, 200,000. You may have 500,000 victims that have been some sort of connection to being a victim in Avon and Somerset. Every day you get hundreds, thousands, potentially millions of bits of information around those people. Humans just cannot produce that insight to be able to spot and see and do. So that technology is augmenting traditional research processes, closing the net on traditional processes, and it's making officers feel a lot more confident that they're able to make evidence-based decisions and not just, I think we have to go and do that, and then the wheel falls off over there. So it's not taking away professional judgment, it's making better decisions more of the time for them. It always ends with an officer making decisions, and if you build it for them, you do that process, then you'll get engagement and excitement, not to them, with them.
And what can business leaders in the C-suite do to help those colleagues, employees that might be affected by these changes, right? Because if before I would spend 10 hours a week myself doing something, then now there is this tool, it might seem like a threat to my profession. So how can those leaders stimulate the adoption of these tools while supporting their employees?
I was firstly that a lot of, I'll take the example of the policing, a lot of the cops were thirsty for information. They didn't have the basic information being provided. So when we say, you know, it's a threat given them that information, well, they were never getting it and they needed it to do their job, the basics of their job. So we were always providing, again, something that was of value to them straight away. And the key thing was having them design and build what they needed to do their jobs well and to protect the public. So rather than being done to them from a, say, a centralised IT perspective, there you go, you're having that, or compliance figures, rather than we were saying, what do you need to do your job better? So if they are involved in the design process, and I would take officers and cops in my senior role in policing to our chief officers to say, this is what our business is building. Very different, turning it around, very different sort of process.
So I need to ask, because it's a big elephant in the room when we talk about...
A big elephant, did you say? Or pink elephant?
Big elephant.
A big elephant.
The gorilla in the room.
It's a gorilla now, is it?
We're changing animals. It's the discussion when you
said you'd never change animals at the start of the interview, so I'm not going to start changing the animals around.
Okay,
and you've changed the animals.
It's a big elephant in the room.
Okay, right. We'll go with elephant.
The ethics component of these solutions, right? Okay, it's always discussed. The typical example, algorithm that decides who goes to jail, who doesn't, the biases. What's your take there?
This talk, right, you're going to get me excited now. I'm really frustrated by the question. It's a very good question, and it's on the you know, it is very.
I had to do it.
You had to do it, yeah. Okay, so traditionally, you imagine 200,000 offenders and 100,000 of victims in the system. Okay, how does traditionally someone choose who to target? How do you think?
Stereotypes.
Stereotyping, bias. It just happens to come across their desk. Yeah. So, okay, so that's traditionally. Actually, we might have someone who might have some racist tendencies working in the police force. Okay. Unconscious bias, for example. Traditionally, they miss information because they're not able to process and churn the volumes of information like a modelling software might be able to do. So straight away, you've got a problem. Yeah, and that's why that murder case and many other cases like that, by the way, one of the biggest learnings from serious case reviews is where information is not pieced together properly and shared in a very timely fashion. So that's the first thing. Secondly is that when you're using the modelling software, you've got an auditable way of monitoring bias, measuring bias, and the precision and recall of any of the models that are being used. You can also use ethics committees, so the members of externally of the community that are brought in to challenge, you know, to say what are you using it for, how are you using it, to gain confidence in the solutions that you're doing and the community. You can go and talk to the community about it, about how much time it's saving. So if you're able to save 3.5 hours per officer per week, 5,000 staff, and so that's now being put back into the community to safeguard and tackle offenders. If you're talking to the community and having a real engagement with the community around these things, then they're going to start being on your side. They're going to start being with you. I used to go out with the chief to public meetings where we would show them in real time how many resources we've actually got available to deploy to instance, how many instances we've got now on the screen, for example. If we were in one of those meetings, on the screen now, how many officers we've got available on a Saturday night or a Friday night, whenever the meeting was, and they'd be surprised and shocked. We'd also show them how much time has been spent on their patch from officers, what they've been doing, and the analytics started to generate confidence. So that question where you started, what about the ethics? Actually, the obstacle's the way here. It's actually a very powerful thing to improve the ethics in policing or any other organisation that use transparency of information, tin opening the organisation like never before. So, I'm a strong advocate that people need to embrace the data protection rules, the ethics, and you're right to ask that question with the gorilla, elephant, or hippo, or whatever is in the room. But actually, fundamentally, the public are losing out. They are dying. They genuinely are, and they are having serious harm because organisations and the leadership are not implementing analytics fast enough. The technology out there is phenomenal, and I think if there's always a balance between data, analytics, and then professional judgment and risk, you've always got a professional making that judgment at the end of the decision. At the moment where we are of technology, so please don't stop. If anyone's listening, please. There's no one here now, but please don't hold back. Push the boundaries around analytics with your front line. Yeah.
What is the cost of doing something versus also what is the cost of not doing anything?
Yeah, well, one murder. The cost of a human life. Again, knowing now that these analytics are in place across that organisation. The cost of a human life is you can't replace that. Financially, it could even be £1 million to investigate. So, whichever way you look at it, as long as you've got the assurance and governance that it's being used for the greater good, which is what people say, then that's great. People should worry about the private stuff around what you're signing up to on your phone a lot more. I think, the stuff when you click, sign you this, and this, just to see a web page or an app these days. That's more dangerous, I think, for people's, than the other stuff where people try and do good.
So I think you mentioned a couple of things that are also translatable for other industries. Just be transparent. What you do with the data, with your models, be transparent.
Yeah.
Say why you're doing it.
Yeah.
And measure the impact and the effect you're having and communicate that.
Definitely.
So if people understand how and why and the result, then they can believe and want to use these kind of solutions, right?
And you're absolutely right. And, actually you can even get staff within the organisation to be part of that model building process, to add a layer of professional judgment on what the model's saying and what it's doing in terms of the build process. You're spot on, I think, with that comment. Yeah.
So, Sean, we have asked...
Someone clapping, does that mean we finished?
That's a very good point. Yeah. We have asked the visitors today at the expo.
Yeah.
We presented the quote and we asked what they think about it. Yeah. So let's have a look at that video and then we'll discuss with you.
So I've got to turn around, have I? Okay.
Yeah. Ik zal in eerste instantie de data gebruiken om zelf de beslissing te nemen. Maar als ik zie dat het repeteert, oftewel dat het eigenlijk programmeerbaar wordt, dan zal ik het wel overlaten daarna aan het systeem.
In principe wil ik altijd zelf de vinger erop leggen. Tenzij ik precies weet hoe het automatisch ingeregeld is. Dus ik wil tot in detailniveau weten of we het zelf geprogrammeerd moeten hebben. Het script hebben geschreven moeten hebben. Wat dan de uitkomst zal geven. In dat geval, dan weet ik wat het script doet. En dan zou ik zeggen, oké, op dit moment kan ik het volledig vertrouwen. Maar een script van een ander of van een partij dat het geschreven heeft, vind ik heel lastig. Dan zou ik zelf onderzoek doen of zelf naar de visualisatie kijken van klopt het wel.
So, Sean, the quote was, I rather take decisions based on visualizations instead of relying on a system that automatically takes decisions for me. And then the first of our visitors has said, well, if the task is a repeatable task, then I'd rather have a system repeating tasks instead of me doing it. And then the second one mentioned that I'd rather understand how the system works, who the system works, before I want to use it or I believe in it. What's your take on decision making based on good visuals, which Qlik can clearly provide, versus more automated decision making?
Okay, I think quite simply, it all depends on the risk involved in the task that you're asking it to make a decision on, isn't it? And again, this is all about how people interpret risk, business risk, and also understand the accuracy of the modelling and the decision making that the machine or the technology is actually doing. Give you an example. So, in intelligence processing, in intelligence processing, so a bit of intelligence coming in and say that you're dealing drugs or you're driving a certain type of car. You can get technology to understand the verbatim of the report, so the text of the report. It will then basket that off into, it's a report on drugs or a report on, and the harm of it. Oh, we've got to do something now or not. Now, the question here is that how accurate is that? Well, for some things, it's very good. So if it's just about reporting a vehicle number, it can take a vehicle number, and then that will go into the system quite easily. Report. If it's about, he might be involved in knife crime and potential risk of harm. You don't want a computer to make that decision, so it would basket that. So the technology can basket that bit off for a human to look at. So I guess the answer to this is there is no on-off switch that technology does. It's a line from, we're very confident that the machine can make great decisions 95% of the time here. Great, we'll automate that bit. This bit it's a bit of a grey area. Are we willing to accept the risk and do it or not? And this area, we need someone to look at it. So I think there's that. People got to get away from black and white around technology. I don't use this in a black and white fashion. The computer, the mobile phone just told me to do it. I'm going to go and do it. And I think people need to have a understanding, and the leadership needs to understand how technology really works, how the risk is, and then how our professionals use and apply that information.
So, what you say is low risk, highly repetitive, low value tasks.
Yeah.
Let them automate.
It. Yeah.
Focus on higher value tasks for the humans.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
definitely wisdom. I mean, computers don't do wisdom. Even humans make decisions well most of the time when they use evidence well, and then they apply some human wisdom to it.
Empathy, common sense, things that actually are not in the system. That
thinking
strategically.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and creativity. And what you want to do at the end of that process is we need to be thinking of outcomes. Again, how much time is it saving a person to be able to add value and action and do something different? How much, in policing terms, how much can we shift our resources to being preventative, proactive, rather than reactive? Just going from incident to incident. So, and I think it's part of that BI leadership program, and our leaders need to understand this. Not enough of our leaders really understand those kind of things. Personally, I've seen. Yeah.
Okay, Sean, we're arriving to the end of this episode.
Yeah.
Before we part, is there something you would like to tell our viewers about analytics, ethics?
Yeah.
What is your parting? What are your parting words for our viewers?
I just think, having experienced it firsthand, the difference predictive analytics can have in organisations, certainly in the public sector and healthcare, which is where I work. Do it. Do it. Challenge, disrupt, and never be afraid. Ask for forgiveness afterwards, not for permission, and create some wow and change people's lives with data. That's why I left policing. I still do a role within Qlik now, where I work with customers to do that. So, how have I left policing? From that, I can do it on a big scale. Like now, where's this going? I've got an impact on many more people than what I did in policing. So, which sounds strange, but it's true. So, do it. Go out and do it. Be a champion, everyone. Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. Thank you, Sean, for being here today. This was Studio Data. I was your host from the Big Data Expo in Utrecht. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks,
Thank you.